A desert planet with twin suns.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?
Use my knowledge. Much to learn, you still have.
Welcome back to Twin Sun Talks, folks. I'm your host, Jonah Liu. Thank you so much for listening, and welcome to our 10th alien species profile. This is our final one in this series. I've been doing this for about a year now, and once again, they are no longer prominent alien species. This last bit is actually probably the least prominent that you can get, but I decided to choose species that I found interesting rather than that I felt would be the most educational when looking at the Star Wars galaxy. But that being said, I think that y'all will still enjoy it. So without further ado, let's dive into ARC Trooper training.
Gentlemen, who wants to be an ARC Trooper? I do, sir!
So in this episode, we're going to be going over Cayuzo, Pau'ans, Biasians, Harch, Maz's species, and Yoda species. So, that being said, let's start out with Cayuzo. They are native to the planet of Phatrong. They speak Cayuzo, and they have green, tan, or pinkish skin with glowing yellow eyes, and they evolved very dense muscle structures and fast reflexes because their home world is very gravity heavy. So, especially when they're on standard gravity worlds, they're able to jump very high, they're able to move very fast, and they're much stronger than normal beings, even though their figures are pretty lean. They often wear special equipment to accommodate for their homeworld in order to help them not fall ill in standard conditions. And they had two major phenotypes. One is tall and lanky, and the other one is short and stocky. They had a very political society with a strong sense of justice, lending them to occupations such as bounty hunters, law enforcement, and stuff like that. At least in the greater galaxy. And they had these organizations known as Clovox, which were comprised of Cayuzo warriors, and Cayuzo warriors wore iconic wide-brimmed battle helmets, which could be used both as weapons and shields. And members of the species include Embo, who's one of my favorite bounty hunters. He's introduced to us in the Clone Wars. He's really, really awesome. And then a character named Constable Zuvio, who doesn't look like Embo at all, but he's a part of that second phenotype, which is a bit shorter and stockier. And he is a character on Jakku in The Force Awakens, working at Nema Outpost as law enforcement. And he has kind of a similar wide brim hat to Embo, but not near as cool. But that being said, that's about all that I had about Cayuzo. But, I mean, that's more information than I was expecting about a species that has such little representation in the movies. I think that it's, honestly, that might be my favorite research that I've done for one of these is for the Cayuzo, because I thought that was just really fascinating. Moving on to Pau'ans. They're native to the planet of Utapau, which we get to see in Revenge of the Sith. That's where Obi-Wan and General Grievous fight. They speak Basic and Upatese. They have gray-lined skin with black eyes, and they are characterized by jagged teeth, slender frames, and tall stature. They coexist with the diminutive Utai, and the collective term for all natives to the planet of Utapau are Utapauans, and they are carnivorous. They eat raw meat and dwell within sinkholes in the planet's surface. And they have lifespans of close to 700 years, which earned them the name the Ancients. And they have two stomachs, which help with digestion, and we got to see how that could be useful in the recent Obi-Wan Kenobi show, but I won't spoil that in case you haven't watched it. And members of the species include the Grand Inquisitor, who we get to see in Rebels and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And we also meet Tyon Medon, who is he's the dock keeper that Obi-Wan Kenobi talks to and says, "We are being held hostage, 10th level, thousands of battle droids." That guy who has kind of the messed up teeth and everything, that's Tyon Medon. But that's about all that I have about Pau'ans. Next up, I'm going to mess this up again, but it is this Biasians. Biasians, and they are native to the planet of Thespius. They speak Biasian and Basic, and they have green or orange skin with very long hair, and they're characterized by a snake-like body, 4 arms, which they normally keep one pair of them tucked underneath their clothes, and they also have very prominent beards. They rested by sleeping, but their primary source of rest was entering an intense meditative trance, which kind of helped them heal neurologically, which is kind of an interesting thing. And their members of the species include Pau'ans, who is a member of the Jedi Council. We get to see him in live action in The Phantom Menace and maybe Attack of the Clones, and then we get to see him in the Clone Wars for a little bit. He was supposedly one of the Order 66 survivors. We don't have any confirmation or denial of that. And he was also one of the few Jedi who trained directly under Master Yoda, along with the likes of Count Dooku. So, little interesting tidbit about Pau'ans. Next up, we have the Harch. Now, if you haven't watched the Clone Wars, then you probably haven't seen this kind of alien, but they're rather interesting. They are native to the planet of Secundus Ondo. They speak Harkic as well as Basic, and they have green skin or gray skin with brown, white, or gray hair that grows out of that skin. And they are characterized by a spider-like appearance. They're very arachnid-ish, and they also have 6 red eyes and 8 limbs. That's 6 usable arms and then 2 legs. And what's interesting is they're actually genetic cousins of Aqualish, which I covered in an earlier species profile, and they have many subspecies within their species that some inherited things like spinnerets, some inherited things like venom from their arachnid ancestors. So some of them could spin webs, some of them had poisonous saliva. And they were traditionally very individualistic and aggressive, and while they were capable of eating things like solid meats or vegetation, they primarily kept a diet of liquid protein. And members of the species include the likes of Admiral Trench, who we get to meet in the Clone Wars. He's a brilliant tactician, very interesting character. Super cool. Unfortunately, these last 2 alien species don't have canonical names, but I felt like they were worth addressing just because of the fact that they don't have names. And the first is Maz's species. Her homeworld is unknown, capable of speaking Basic, obviously. She has orange skin, very short, diminutive stature. She was over 1,000 years old, if I'm not mistaken, so obviously they had very long lifespans. And members of the species include Maz Kanata. We really don't know much else, but we do know a little bit more about this next species, which is Yoda's species. Now, George Lucas intentionally kept Yoda's species a secret, or kept it a mystery to preserve the sort of mysticism around the character. Yoda, his homeworld is unknown. He's capable of speaking Basic, although Yoda speaks backwards. Or not backwards, but you know how he speaks. He has sort of a very unique speaking pattern, whereas Yaddle, especially within the confines of the Skywalker Saga video games, speaks normally. So, for whatever reason, Yoda has this weird sort of choppy backspeak. And then we don't know how Grogu speaks. We have never heard him say a word, but we could assume that he is capable of speaking Basic just because that's how the other 2 in his species were that we see in canon. But they are green. They have green skin with very large ears and 3-fingered hands. They're very small, they have a carnivorous diet, and they have lifespans of hundreds and hundreds of years and very slow development. As we know, Grogu is already 50 years old by the time he's in the care of the Mandalorian, and Yoda lived to be 900. Yaddle was killed, so she died of unnatural causes. So she's not one to mark a benchmark off of, but members of the species include Yoda, who's obviously the most well-known. We also have Grogu, who's colloquially known as Baby Yoda, the kind of the marketing opportunity from The Mandalorian. Very beloved, has probably brought a lot of new people into Star Wars. So, and I know that I personally absolutely love Baby Yoda. So, big fan of him. And then Yaddle is probably the least known, but she is a female species or female member of Yoda's species that we get to see in The Phantom Menace. I'm not sure what her canonical death is, but I know that in Legends she died saving Anakin Skywalker. Or maybe that's canon. I'm not entirely sure. But in either Legends or canon, she dies saving Anakin Skywalker's life and containing an explosion. So pretty cool, but a little unclear of what her fate actually is in canon. That being said, that's all that I have for this episode. This is our final alien species profile. If you want, I can keep doing these every once in a while, but I'm not going to do them. I've been doing them like once a month for the last year-ish. So we're not going to be doing that anymore. But if you want me to go into any other species more specifically, I can maybe make that its own segment and just do that within the confines of a bigger episode. There are a lot of species that I still haven't gone over, so obviously that wouldn't be too big of an issue, but there definitely aren't really any more very prominent, well-known species to go through, so I might need to change the title of the series. But that being said, this wouldn't be a proper episode if I didn't leave you with just a little bit more. So today's little factoid is that Embo is actually voiced by Dave Filoni himself. And if you don't know who Dave Filoni is, he is a very prominent writer and executive behind Star Wars. He's kind of George Lucas's protege. He was probably most heavily involved in the Clone Wars and Rebels and the Bad Batch, but he's also been involved in projects like The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi, all that stuff. He's the lead creative director at Lucasfilm right now. He's a really amazing guy, but he voiced Embo in the Clone Wars, and the Cayuzo language is actually him reading French words poorly. So just a fun little tidbit there. That being said, make sure you follow us on Instagram at Twin Sun Talks. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Twin Sun Talks Podcast, and follow and listen on any streaming platforms on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Any support is really appreciated. And yeah, you've taken your first steps into a larger world. May the Force be with you, and I will see y'all in the next episode. Bye, friends.